Welcome to another edition of Living Legacies. I'm Tom Morrow, your host of the North County Times, and today we have a very special guest with us, Jack Kellogg of Vista. Jack is a former World War II B-17 pilot who had quite an experience during the big war. And welcome to the show, Jack.
Thank you, Tom.
Whereabouts are you originally from?
Born in Denver, Colorado. 10/17/17.
1917. Okay. Did you grow up in Denver?
No, I left there when I was about 5 years old.
Moved to California?
Yeah, well, I came from a broken family.
I see.
And I had an older sister and a younger brother. And my grandmother and aunt adopted the other two. And I went with my dad up in a sawmill near the Canadian border outside of Spokane, Washington,
right.
A little west. I grew up there, so until I was 17 years old.
Where'd you go to high school?
Well, I went to West Valley High School, which was near Spokane. Mm-hmm. And then in my senior year, I came down to live with my grandmother in Santa Monica. And I finished high school there and went across to Santa Monica JC and was drafted in my second year there.
And that was what year, 1940?
That was 1940, because I went in the service on April 3rd, 41, that point.
Now, that was before Pearl Harbor?
Yes, about 9 months before Pearl Harbor.
And how did you get into the into flying?
Well, I was in the Signal Corps originally, after basic at March Field, and I was going to Fort Monmouth there, which was a technical school just outside of New York City. And on December the 7th, I was watching a football game at Yankee Stadium, when suddenly they started to play the Star-Spangled Banner. Everybody stood up.
Right in the middle of the game?
Right in the middle of the game. Everything stopped. And after the Star-Spangled Banner, they made the announcement that Pearl Harbor had just been bombed. And all servicemen were to go back to their stations immediately. Well, I didn't, because I was in a school. So that's where I was on D-Day.
So how did you get into the flying unit? Did you apply for officer candidate school, or how did that happen?
No, there was a big demand for cadets, flying cadets at that time, due to the terrible losses in Europe, and they needed replacements. So I thought, well, I'll give it a shot, and I went up and took the physical and mental. I was at Hammerfield, Fresno, when I took that, and they put you on a waiting list. In about 6 weeks, I went to, I started out at Santa Ana Classification Center, and there we probably lost about 30% of the guys there, because had physicals at our own post, and they didn't have the same facilities they did at Santa Ana. So we lost about 30%. It's
always tougher. That second physical is always tougher.
Oh, yeah. Well, very tough. So I graduated out of Santa Ana, went to King City in the Salinas Valley for primary, over to Gardner Field, Taft for basic.
What did you fly in basics?
Basics, we flew BT-13As. That's a single engine.
Yeah. I believe we've got a picture of you standing in front of one, don't we?
Yes, we have that picture.
Yeah.
And from there to Luke Field, Arizona.
Luke was a long ways from Phoenix in those days, wasn't it?
A lot, yeah. Huge open spaces in between.
Of course, now it's surrounded by city.
Surrounded by city,
like Glendale and Peoria and that sort of thing.
I wouldn't even recognize it, no.
How long were you at Luke?
Luke was about 3 months.
So that was a fighter base. You were trained as a fighter pilot, right?
Absolutely. Have you time for a little story about that one?
Well, yeah, very quickly, though.
Okay,
a lot of your life to tell.
Okay, I was assigned to, when I graduated, to a B-17, which was stationed at Ephrata, Washington. I'm a fighter pilot. I went up the next day, met the pilot in front of the airplane. He said, "What do you think?" And I said, "It's awesome." Sort of frightening. And he said, "Well, where'd you graduate from flight school?" I said, "Single engine school, Luke Field, Arizona." He said, "Well, you're going to have a lot to learn. We've got 2 months to go before combat. For instance, if we get in trouble over there and we lose 2 engines, could you help me?" And I said, well, I'm not qualified for twin engine, but if we lose 3, I'll bring you home.
2 months after you got assigned to a B-17 squadron, you're in Europe flying?
2 months afterwards. Well, with a little delay en route, but that's another story.
But they issued you the plane in the States and you flew it across the water?
Yes, we picked that up.
You went to Italy, right?
Went to Italy.
And you were doing bombing runs into Central Europe?
Central Europe, occupied Europe, yes, 7 different countries.
Now, I know that you made how many missions?
Shot down on our 38th.
38 missions.
38.
You're only supposed to fly 25. How come you got those extra missions?
That's in England, Tom. 50 in Italy. And
Is that right?
50, but sometimes 2 for 1.
Why was it that the Italian theater had more flights than the British?
Actually, the way they worked that, any target in Italy was sort of a milk run. If you left Italy and went to another country, you got 2 for 1.
Oh, I see.
So times over the target would be like England, about 26 times over the target.
I see. Okay. So, well, we know that you got shot down, but let's talk about some of those runs that you made just before that. You were on the infamous Ploesti oil field. Tell us about that one.
Well, first of all, Ploesti was one of the most heavily defended targets in Europe.
What was Ploesti?
Ploesti was oil refineries, oil fields. They produced 40% of the total German fuel.
Where was
it? Was in Romania.
Romania.
Not too far from Bucharest. Mm-hmm. Very heavily defended because you can see if they lost the oil, they lost the war. Mm-hmm. So fortunately, we went on the high-level one, about 27,000 feet. It wasn't too bad for us because they hit the B-24s were not as heavily defended as the B-17s, and they always went for the B-24s. And there was a plurality of 24s on that mission, and so we got back pretty well. Good shape.
Was that just one mission that you flew over?
Just one, and one's enough for a lifetime.
Now, tell me about the shuttle runs.
The shuttle runs came shortly after the Ploesti raid. We were briefed to go to Mirgorod, Russia, which is in the Ukraine, and the strategic purpose was we went June 4th, 2 days before, the
D-Day.
D-Day, and
1944.
44, and the object was to pull the German fighters off the French coast, so that that would alleviate some of the problems.
So you'd fly out of Italy. Whereabouts in Italy?
Amendola on the Adriatic Sea.
You'd fly out of there and fly over, bomb.
And yes.
Where would you be bombing?
We bombed a marshalling yard in Romania, and then went on to landed in Mirgorod.
That's where you refueled and
we refueled.
Reloaded on armaments.
Yeah, we refueled, but we also went one more mission to Hungary on an aerodrome, and then came back to Russia, and then flew on out.
I see.
And
so
back
you made
home.
one operation out of Russia and then back.
Yeah, we had.
And then made another bombing run, flying back to Italy.
We hit 3 targets, and we supported the Russian army. And
what mission were you on when you got shot down?
Black Hammer, Germany, synthetic oil plant, July 7th, 1944. Kind of sticks in your mind.
I'll bet it does. What happened?
We were 20 minutes from the target, and 9 ME-109s saw us, came in line astern firing rockets.
But for the younger viewers, ME-109 is a German fighter. A
German single-engine fighter, the best one that the Germans had during the war. And they knocked the plane down on our right side. They queued up, came around again. We were open, and they hit the right starboard engine with rockets. And we immediately, the wing went down about 30 degrees. We couldn't pick it back up. We turned back towards Italy, flew about 20 or 25 minutes, and approached the ground at about 6,000 feet, about 700 feet a minute.
And where were you over? What country?
Slovakia at that point.
That was before Czechoslovakia?
Yeah, before they split into republics. About where we went down was about 40 miles from Vienna, northeast of Vienna.
Austria.
And we all bailed out safely. I saw 6 of them being rounded up in a little village, the village of Sarava. And the Germans completely surrounded it. And I felt, well, I'm not going back there. I can't help them.
You landed
I landed in the trees, yeah, about 4 blocks away. Slipped out of the harness, hit the ground running. And
what happened to the plane?
I saw the plane crash. It made 2 circles around the city and went about a quarter of a mile away when it crashed in a field.
This is a little village in Slovakia?
Yes, Sarava, where we went back a year ago.
So you're on the ground. What happens next?
I evaded for 8 days, lived off carrots and potatoes. The big problem was water. Every time I approached somebody's outside well, the dogs drove me off. So on the 8th day, I passed out in the field, dehydrated. A Slovakian slave laborer found me there. I'd seen him approaching as I went down. We went over to his horse-drawn wagon, laid down in his cot for about 4 hours, pulled out my escape map, showed him where I was from in Italy, and he pointed out Slovakia to designate where I was. And
because at this point in time, you really weren't sure where you were?
I wasn't sure where I was at all.
Mm-hmm.
And but it was about 40, 50 miles from Vienna. I indicated by playing charades that I wanted to get to a church in Vienna, and he started to laugh. Well, in uniform, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So I put on civilian clothes. That's what he wanted me to do. Went outside, hugged him a couple of times, walked down the road about half a mile to what looked like a large British telephone booth. Only it was painted black, no windows. I walked by it about 50 feet. Somebody yelled. I didn't understand the language. So then, he brought up the rifle. That's a universal language.
Yeah,
I just turned around. He went up, showed him my dog tags. To make a long story short, he turned me over to 2 more Hungarians after I was briefed in a small village. And
well, wait a minute, how did the Hungarians get involved in this?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll back up. The checkpoint was that telephone booth, and I passed a frontier into Hungary.
Oh, you walked into Hungary.
And I walked
that's
right
kind of going the opposite direction.
I kept going straight, and that's how
you were going east instead of west.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So at that point, they turned me over to two more Hungarians who were drunk in a little shed. They beat the hell out of me. One at a time. I hadn't gone down. Finally, the big guy came over. They were pretty drunk, and they both started hitting me. I went down.
They weren't asking you any questions. They were just...
Well, we didn't speak the same language.
Yeah.
But they knew who I was. I wasn't an infantryman in the middle of Europe. Mm-hmm. And Vienna was being reduced to ruins. So they had their point. And anyway, an old man came up to the door. He saw the situation. They started to argue. 2 Hungarians picked me up, took me down to a little village where there's a commuter train to Vienna. Turned me over to 2 German Feldwebels, which are sergeants. They handcuffed me. We went on the train down to Budapest from Vienna, through Vienna. That was my time. Anyway, I went to the civilian jail there. Mm-hmm. I was there 40 days. I was known as Mr. Kellogg because I had on the civilian suit. And I have to tell you this, that in war...
This jail is rather infamous, isn't it?
It's an infamous jail. It was a collection point for Jews going up to Auschwitz. But they also interrogated flyers there before they were sent them off up to prison camp. Mm-hmm. And I was there 40 days in solitary. They called me Mr. Kellogg every time I went in.
Not Lieutenant Kellogg.
Not Lieutenant. He had told me that when he pulled out this form from the International Red Cross to identify POWs, was name, rank, and serial number and other questions. And when that first day I went in, he told me, you're here under suspicious circumstances. Will you give me some information? And I said, sure, name, rank, and serial number. And he pulled out the form and he wrote down my name.
This is the German
interrogator.
Yeah.
And he said, rank. And I said, 2nd lieutenant. He said, that's a lie. Where's your uniform? They closed every door on you, see. Mm-hmm. And so I came back about 2 weeks later with my dog tags, and I put those out in front of him. And he said, good morning, Mr. Kellogg. And I said, my title is 2nd lieutenant, and I showed him the dog tags. He said, that won't fly here. He said, in your travels around the countryside, you came upon the body of a dead American aviator, stole his dog tags, and assumed his name.
Well, you must have been thinking the worst at that point in time.
Oh, yeah.
Knowing that you were in a prison that was a collection point for the Jewish people going to the concentration camps.
Exactly.
I mean, that didn't escape you.
No, I'd seen some Jews in there.
Mm-hmm.
They did a lot of the maintenance work around the prison. But you play it out. You don't know what your breaking point is.
What happened next?
Well, on the 40th day, 2 guards came up. I couldn't walk anymore, rubber legs.
This is because of the beatings?
Well, and the starvation. And went in to, they sat me down in the chair. He dismissed them. He stood up.
This is the German interrogator?
The German interrogator. He was a captain. He dismissed them. He stood up and he said, "Good morning, Lieutenant." I knew I was home free. He finally identified me for whatever reasons.
Was this captain, was he a Wehrmacht or was he
He was always Luftwaffe.
Luftwaffe?
Yeah, always Luftwaffe. He had to assume I was a flyer since I wasn't in the middle of occupied Europe.
Yeah.
I didn't walk in.
Yeah.
So, but then he showed me how stupid I was by bringing out a wall chart and table of organization of the 2nd Bomb Group.
He knew as
He
much
knew
about it.
more about me than I did about myself, you know. And so he sent me down to the transport room where there were 39 Allied flyers, and I went in and...
Any of your crew in there?
No. They went in different directions. So then on a bus up to Stalag Luft 3.
Now, tell us about Stalag Luft 3. Where was that located?
Stalag Luft 3 was 60 miles southeast of Berlin.
This is a POW camp.
The POW camp. It's famous for the movie The Great Escape with Steve McQueen and Jim Garner.
Did you get there to join The Great Escape?
No, that happened in March, and I got there towards the end of August.
So you missed out on all the fun?
I missed out on all the fun. It was more...
Because most of them were recaptured, and they were still there when you got there.
Actually, yeah. They shot, there were 50 escaped. They shot 50, and they brought about 4 home. That's all. This was a warning. Don't escape from Stalag Luft 3 or any other prison camp in Germany. That's why that happened.
So now how long were you at Luft 3?
Luft 3, about 9 months till January 29, when they moved us off to Nuremberg. Russians came within 20 miles of Stalag Luft 3, and they moved us all out. 10,000 men in 9 hours.
That's a lot of men to move.
It's a lot of men. We got on cattle cars to... we marched to Spremberg, got on cattle cars to Nuremberg. And then later on, when Patton's Third Army came close to Nuremberg, we moved to Moosburg near Munich, where we were liberated on April 29th of 1945.
By the Americans?
Yeah, by Patton's Third Army, 14th Armored Division. He came in, gave us a pep talk.
Patton himself?
Patton himself.
What was going through your mind at that time? I mean... that's got to be one of the happiest days of your life.
Happiest days of my life, except my wife's here.
Yeah, you better qualify that one, Jack.
I have to qualify. If she's not here, it was.
But that was that had to have been a great moment.
Yeah. Oh, that's the most. It is. It's a tremendous moment.
Now this was an Allied POW camp. You weren't there. It wasn't just Americans.
Yes, they brought all the POWs from all over Germany down to what they called the Redoubt area. 150,000 of us were there when Patton came in. So all nationalities.
What happened after you were liberated? Where'd you go?
They took us out in about 3 days to Landshut, Germany, where I picked up this oxygen meter off a 262.
Now explain what a 262 is.
An Me-262 was the world's first operational jet. The Germans were about a year ahead of us in jet aircraft. And at Landshut, we found one that had landed there, and we just mobbed that thing, and I reached in between a few guys and pulled this off, and it was the oxygen meter.
This is your souvenir from that plane.
That's a souvenir.
Germany hasn't asked for it back yet.
No, afraid not.
So, now, what happened? What happened next? Did you go back to your unit, or did they process you and send you home? Or
No, I went to Le Havre, France. That was a large hospital area. I spent about 2 weeks there. We had a thorough physical and psychological examinations, and they decided that I better go home on a hospital ship. So from Le Havre, we went to Camp Miles Standish in Boston, and from there by troop train home.
Your days at Loop 3, you had indicated to me on our several times of talking about this that you didn't really have it all that bad there. It was
Loop 3 was well organized. We had American Red Cross parcels, 1 per man per week.
So they did give them to you there, huh?
Yeah, they gave them to us there, and it was very well organized. We had General Vanneman was the American commanding officer, was a good friend of Goering's before the war, you know. So he took care of us pretty good.
Was he there?
He was there with us, yeah.
Well, that explains a lot of things.
That explains a lot of things.
Because my uncle was at Luft 1, and they didn't have it quite so nice. All of the Red Cross parcels were boxed.
Yeah.
I mean, were kept away from. It was the Russians that gave them the Red Cross parcels.
Exactly, yeah. That was the difference.
Well, let's move on a little bit now. What did you do for a living? You were a salesman when you come back from the war?
I was a salesman for West Nile in San Diego, and about a year I made territory manager there, and I had a couple of guys under me.
What year did you retire? You're living in Vista now?
Yeah, well, I did a couple of other things. When Hunt's Foods bought out West Nile, I was terminated. I went back to San Diego State College, got my teaching credential, taught for a while, but at my age it was tough to get a standard job. So then I came to Vista. I was in the contracting business with a friend of mine for about 5 years and retired from that.
Well, you've had a rather active life over these last few years with the renaissance of interest in World War II. You went back to Czechoslovakia last year?
Last year, yeah.
And something very interesting happened to you there.
Yes, extremely interesting. 5 of us, of the airmen, were invited as guests of the Slovakian government for 5 days.
Were this 5 of your crew members? Or?
No, assorted crews.
We're running out of time, Jack.
Okay.
So
Well, we went back, and it was like royalty. They treated us wonderfully well. In my case, I went back to Serova, where the aircraft went down.
Where your plane crashed?
Where the plane crashed. They took me to the site. This is 52 years later. And a guy took me out to his car afterwards, lifted up the trunk lid. It was all by translation. Another guy was there. And he said, "This gentleman wishes to present you with these 2 items that were from the crash site 52 years ago. And this is the gearbox. Now this operates the flaps. The power source is on top. Turns these 2 things.
This is from your B-17.
Flap control from the B-17. This is a piece of the fuselage, which was, of course, in several pieces. And he saved this one, and it was just a great trip. Never forget it.
He thought that it wasn't you that told me that he was just waiting all those years for some American to come and claim their property?
Yeah, and he said, "What kept you?" And I said, "You never ask. It's over." You know?
Well, Jack, you've gotten quite a few awards over the years. Explain some of your medals that you received as a result of World War II.
Okay, we'll start over with France. That was for the D-Day affair. We flew out of Russia, but it was on July 6th. So I went there and they presented it. Yeah, this was a presentation. This one is from the Ukraine, where we landed. This was a commemorative medal. We got it about 50 years later from the embassy. This one is from Russia, the same thing. And the one to the extreme right is a prisoner of war medal.
Well, I have to say that other than your little sojourn through the Slovakian and Hungarian countryside in civilian clothes and that 40 days in that Budapest prison, there were just thousands of guys just like you in the prison camps. So I mean, that part was not unique, but what you went through by changing clothes.
Changing clothes, the story changes, Tom, right there, radically.
If you had it to do over again, would you have done that?
Well, let's amend that a little bit. I didn't know at the time if you put on civilian clothes it was against international law.
Oh,
you could be shot on the spot.
As a spy.
Now, if I had known that, I don't think I would have done this.
Well, that may be because they were in such a hurry to get you guys across the way to start bombing that
Exactly.
they didn't give you that good of
We
indoctrination.
never heard that at briefing. Never heard.
You weren't asleep on that.
No, I wasn't asleep on that one.
You got one final honor from Russia, and that was what was that for? You got a commendation.
Well, that was this one, the two medals. Oh, I got a citation. Oh,
Yeah.
sure. I have a citation from Boris Yeltsin and the Russian government. They were so happy that I had been there and that I'd risked my life in this type of thing.
And
Very
you were
nice.
involved in that recent exhibit, the World War II through
World War
Russian
II
eyes.
through Russia. You were there with me.
Yeah. We've got to wrap it up, Jack. I appreciate you coming in and telling us your story. This is a fascinating, and I know that people that read my column have read about you several times, but this is an opportunity to get it out of your own words.
Yeah.
I'm Tom Morrow. This has been Living Legacy. Join us again next time here on KOCT. Thank you. This program is made possible through the generous underwriting grants of Hatter Williams and Pretty Insurance Services of Oceanside, providing North County with complete insurance needs for more than half a century. The TriQuest Corporation, providing quality office and manufacturing space in Oceanside. McCabe's Bridge Ocean View Restaurant for fine dining while overlooking the harbor and the Pacific Ocean. And the North County Times, serving all of North County with complete local daily news coverage and internet services.